So a really amazing and very useful thing to know is that Generative Fill will respect the depth of field. So we're going to start with this photo of me in my loft in LA a few years ago, and I'm going to demonstrate it. Then we're going to use another image, and I'm going to show you how to create that and generate it for yourself. So why don't we just start with creating some kind of an object here. We could do whatever we want. Why don't we just do the obvious? We'll just do a cat. Always got to have a cat, right? All right, so there's a cat, there's a second cat, a third cat. The eyes are weird on that one, but that one looks really good, and so does that one. And you can see that they're sharp in focus. Now, if I generate an object over here in the blurry area, because it's out of focus now, because it's further away, and I type in, say, car. Now notice that the car, even though it's very large, it's a giant car. I would just make the selection smaller to make that fit, or we could do something like an SUV that's more accurate. And notice that it's blurry, and it just kind of, because of where it is in the focal plane, it kind of respects that. I do notice that it's way too big compared to the other cars, so let me just show you how to fix that. I just hit Control key T, that's Command T, and then we'll just make this a bit smaller so it's more to scale. And then just simply hit generate one more time, because we're still on that generative layer. It's still a car. It just doesn't match the background anymore. But if I hit generate, it's going to create 3 more versions of it, and all of those are going to fit that new mask, and they're all going to be to scale and blend it into the background. There we go, much better. And we can look at all of those options, and they just fit right in there. All right, so what happens if we have a photograph like this, where we've got a lot of distance, but the aperture was closed down more, so we don't have that extended depth of field. We have a very wide depth of field, whereas the other shot had a more shallow depth of field. Okay, so what we can do is we can imitate that. So if we choose filter, and then we go to the blur, and we go to the blur gallery, and we choose field blur, we can add the depth of field. So what we're going to do is tap on the bottom. I want to set that to 0. So here's a tip. Hit the Control or Command key, double click, and that will set that blur to 0. That's the blur amount there. And the second point there, the blur is at 15. We can make it more or less, but this will work. So we're just going to click OK. So what I've done now is I've simulated shooting with a shallower depth of field with maybe an aperture of maybe a 2.8 or a 4 or something like that. Okay, so now when we go to put something in the distance, the question is, will Generative Fill know that this is not a real photograph, as far as the blur? Yes, it will. It will do that. Let's do this right now. We're going to put a car into the background. Let's grab it here, and we're just going to type in car. All right, and here we have 3 different vehicles that it's created. And they look quite good. Okay, so one of the things, notice how much blur is on this and the distance that it's at. If I make this smaller, Control T, there's Command T, I'm going to make this much smaller, and I'm going to put it up here to simulate that it's actually further away from the camera now. Watch what happens when I regenerate this. It's actually going to adapt the amount of blur. Look at that. I think that's pretty amazing. And then just to kind of show you one more, let's bring it forward now. This would create a toy car, but let's make it bigger. And let's see if it can get us a sharper car by coming forward more. So now we're going to generate in that larger area. We're just going to hit generate one more time. And look at that. Now that car is much sharper. Okay, that's almost like a Mercedes, almost. All right, so there's something for you to bear in mind now when you're generating and you have a shallower depth of field. Pay attention to placement and scale, because they really do matter.